This happened 17 years ago, so please forgive me if the exact details are a little fuzzy. It was the summer of 1999, and I was spending the vacation with my mother in New Mexico. I was a 12-year-old girl, and I had a severe attitude. I made friends easily with a few girls that lived just around the corner from my mom's house. We spent every moment together that summer. We were a group of four, all of us thinking we were older and smarter than everyone else. Nikki, Katie, Julie, and myself. We were the last generation of home phone lines, playing outside on the trampoline until dark, and sleepovers. We had no cell phones or internet. We watched VHS tapes, listened to cassette tapes on our Walkman. It was okay to let your children walk around town at night, and we rarely locked the front door. My backyard had a concrete wall around it, and a gate. Behind the wall was desert, as far as the eye could see. There's the barren wasteland of dirt, cacti, shrubs, and mountains, way off in the distance. This town had a major railroad track running straight through it, and there was a major street that had gas stations galore, restaurants, hotels, and attractions. We all received the same warnings from our parents. Stay out of the desert, stay away from the tracks, and don't walk the main strip at night. Do you think we listened? Absolutely not. Julie, Nikki, and I spent our days walking through the desert, crossing the tracks, down the strip to Katie's house. Sometimes we would just walk around till dusk. Sometimes we would go to my house to jump on the trampoline. This particular day we got to Katie's house, prepared to stay the weekend because her parents were out of town and we were having a party. The first night the girls were jumping from a spiral staircase to a giant beanbag. I refused to participate in this due to my extreme fear of heights. We then got down to sleepover business, so to say, and decided to watch the original Exorcist. You know, the one with Linda Blair? Fucking scary shit, man. I didn't sleep. Second night, we all told our parents that Katie's mom was going to drive us to the movies. We obviously didn't tell our parents that we were alone. We all got money for the movies and then promptly walked down the strip to get junk food at the little store. That's what we called it. Now, I wish I could say that we were aware of our surroundings, but we weren't. We were absolutely oblivious of the man who followed us all the way back to the house. I feel that I should mention that Katie's parents were loaded. They had a huge property with numerous buildings and broken down cars that her dad was remodeling. Her house had a large open kitchen, dining, and living room. There were no walls and the whole room was lined with windows. There were 2 doors, front and back. The day went just as planned. We got our junk food and made it home safely. We made pizza in the oven and for some reason one of the girls turned on the TV to the news. As we were eating, we heard a story about staying indoors because there was a report of a suspicious man walking the strip. That's it. Suspicious man. We laughed and joked about that man. Fast forward a few hours, I don't remember what happened, but as girls do, someone said something that hurt Julie's feelings and she stormed out of the house. I went after her and opened the front door, just in time to see her light up a cigarette. We were bad kids. I sat with her on a bench while she bitched about the other 2. Suddenly the air got thick with anxiety. Julie felt it too. I quietly asked if she felt like we were being watched. She responded with a tiny nod, and then we were blinded. Someone was in the car in the driveway with their bright lights on us. My heart was racing as I stood up and pulled Julie out of the spot she seemed to be stuck in. As we turned to run inside, the man made a sound. I can't describe this sound other than a high-pitched squeal that turned into a growl. I was scared beyond all reason, but I somehow managed to get myself and Julie inside the house. As soon as we got inside, the headlights went off and it was pitch black again. I locked the door and turned off the light. By this time, Julie had regained her composure to tell the other 2 what had happened. As I frantically checked the back door and turned every light off, I told them to shut up, and they listened by the back door. I heard the car door close, and I was praying to every god that he would go away. By my cheek, the door handle started to slowly turn. Then frantically, I crawled away from the door and moved to where my friends were. For the next 2 or 3 hours, we sat still as stone and listened to this man bang on every window and door, trying to get inside. The phone was located across the room, right next to two windows. I finally got up the courage to run up to the phone, and I called my mom. I told her that we were all alone and someone was trying to get inside. I hung up with her and waited. Julie screamed to the man that we called the cops, and all of a sudden the banging stopped. We sat and waited, listening to him get in his car, and then that sound again. The squeal that turned into a growl, and then he was gone. My mom and stepdad showed up and checked the whole place out. They found tire tracks and cigarette butts in the driveway where his car was, proving he had watched us for quite a while. The truly scary part were the scratch marks all over the doors and the windows. Needless to say, Katie spent the rest of the weekend at Nikki's house and had a great story for her parents when they got home. Our parents didn't punish us for lying and being reckless. I guess 2 hours of torture at the hands of a madman was enough. We made a report to the police, but the man was never caught. So, suspicious, creepy fuck, it's not me. This story happened more than 10 years ago, when I was still a student. It has a few graphic details of animal harm and graphic violence, so discretion is advised. A bit of backstory. As with most students, I was always broke and had a few ventures apart from my part-time job to bring me extra money. One of them was house and pet sitting. I've always had a love for animals, so when this couple contacted me to ask them to house sit for them for the last few days before they returned from their overseas trip, asked the last sitter had bailed on them and their 6-month-old golden retriever puppy, I'd be alone. So I jumped at the opportunity. The fact that they promised to pay me the full 2-week fee for staying there less than a week made it just even more appealing. Little did I know how bad it would turn out. I got the details, got the keys from the agent, and headed over to the house as it was already after 5 p.m. and almost dark since it was early spring. I got to the house, which was a really nice place, but it bordered a not-so-good area that was, and still is, prone to crime. House break-ins, robberies, etc. It didn't bother me much, 'cause, nothing will happen to me. I know, young and naive. The first 4 nights went without a hitch. Watching movies, jacuzzi, and just generally enjoying myself. The owners would have returned on the 5th day, fairly late at night. I got a call from them at about 10 p.m. saying their flight got delayed. They're going to stay in a hotel and do the 3.5-hour drive back the following morning, and asked if I could just stay there again that night, which I was fine with. I was already there and I had my overnight bags still in my car. I called my dad to let him know of the plans as I was still staying with my parents, and he specifically asked what the address was. I normally did not give them details like that because I was old enough to look after myself, but I still believe to this day that giving my dad the address probably saved my life. I eventually got to bed at about 1 a.m., and it felt like I had only slept 5 minutes when I was awoken to a window breaking, and I could hear movement and what sounded like footsteps running down the hallway. The first thing I did was grab my phone and just hit redial. Thanks to my old Motorola phone, redialing was as simple as pressing one button. And as my dad was the last number I had called, I could only hope that he woke up from the call. I then dropped the phone in between the headboard and the mattress in case my dad picks up so that I can hear what's going on. I had barely done that when the first guy stormed through the bedroom door. I could see his silhouette and that he had a knife in his hand. When he saw me, he raised it and ran at me. Now, one thing to those that are unfamiliar with South Africa and the crime is that robberies and house invasions are very brutal and violent. People get murdered or tortured if they in the slightest retaliate or do not cooperate with their robbers. So, out of instinct, I raised my legs back when he came at me, and when he came within reach, I kicked both legs out as hard as I could. Now, I'm not a small guy, I'm 6'3", and at that stage I weighed about 100 kilograms, or 220 pounds, and I was fit and strong. My time not spent at the uni or work was at the gym. I could do an easy 250-pound bench press or 350-pound squat. When I kicked and made contact with the guy, he completely lifted off the ground and shot into the wall. Luckily, the knife shot out of his hand as well. Before he got the chance to get up, I was on top of him, driving my right knee into his face and his head into the wall. I knew that my life depended on it, so I put in some extra force. The guy dropped like a sack of potatoes, but before I could get up, I heard the sound of a pistol cock and I froze. Felt like all the blood drained from my body and I became just numb. I remember the only thing that went through my head was that if he shot me, that I would rather die than be disabled or dependent on other people that will have to take care of me. He stood like that with a pistol against my head for what felt like hours, but was probably less than 10 seconds. I didn't move, and he eventually said in very broken English to get on the bed, face down. I panicked, but thought if he wanted to shoot me, that he already would have done so. So I did as he said. He threw a blanket over me, and I turned into the fetal position with my back against the wall, just so if they wanted to stab me, I had my legs and arms in front of me to protect my body. Now, by that time, I had forgotten that I had called my dad, and the guy that I'd kneed is still down. I heard a third guy come into my room, and I could hear what sounded like Portuguese to me. I couldn't understand what they said, but I recognized it as we used to go to Mozambique on holidays a lot. And that's the main language they spoke there. The one guy tried to get the guy that I put down off the ground, while the other started to ransack the house, shoving valuables into a bag. It was about at this time that I heard tires screeching and a car approaching at what sounded like Mach 1. The car skidded to a halt right in front of the gate, and I heard someone scream. It was my dad. The three inside the house panicked and ran out the back door and tried to jump the fence. My dad opened fire, shooting in their general direction. Now, I know my dad missed them on purpose, because if he wanted to hit them, he would have, as he's not one of, but the best shot that I know. And I'm not just saying that because he's my dad. He is ex-Army Special Forces, represented South Africa in the Clay Pigeon World Championships a couple of years, has various regional pistol and rifle championship titles, and is a gunsmith by occupation. I've seen him hit golf balls at 50 meters with his pistol. Politics and the racial situation in the country would have had him in big trouble if he had hit one of them. I grabbed the house keys and pressed the gate remote, and my dad called the police while he came in. I met him at the front door and he walked out to the car to wait there for the police. It took them over an hour to get there, some excuse of no vehicle available at the time. By that time I'd calmed down and started to look for the dog. I couldn't find her anywhere. I grabbed a flashlight from my dad and started scanning the surrounding yard, and as I got to the corner I could see her laying on the ground. I got to her and saw she was dead. Later autopsies revealed she was poisoned, and the police found pieces of meat laced with poison near the fence. Poisoning is pretty standard practice in my country for dealing with dogs at a house or area that is targeted for a break-in or robbery. I was fuming and so sad. The police was also pretty useless and had a don't-give-a-shit attitude and barely took our statements. By that time it was starting to get light, and I retrieved my bag, phone, and locked the house as good as I could without touching anything, and drove home behind my dad. Only when I got home I got the story from my dad's side. He said he answered my call only to hear shouting and what sounded like fighting going on, and when I did not respond, he flew out of the house and raced over. Luckily, he asked me for the address the previous night, and he knew the area well, so he knew exactly which house it was. No, my dad got there pretty quickly, and he stayed on the line the whole time, only hanging up when he stopped at the gate. My parents' house is about 10 kilometers or 6 miles from there, through a residential area. It's normally about a 20-minute drive, but the call duration was only 7 minutes and 13 seconds. I met the detective there later that day, gave my statement, they took fingerprints, etc., and the owners got back about the same time. The rest of the day was a blur, as I came down from the shock and adrenaline. No, that's not where the story ends. About 7 or 8 months later, I got a call from the detective telling me they caught the guys, and I must come to a lineup to point them out. I specifically told her that I did not see any of their faces, as it was dark, and after the guy held the gun against my head, I was under the blanket and didn't see anything. She assured me that they caught them on fingerprints and will show them to me beforehand, which might not be the ethically correct way to do it, but they wanted to have as much evidence as possible against them. You'll understand why in a minute. I got to the police station, and unlike what you see in the movies, there's no one-way glass or separate room. They bring the 3 guys into the room and make them stand against the wall. The one, which I was later told was the leader, which also happened to be the one that I had need, looked at me with more hate than I'd ever seen in my life. He had the eyes of someone that would slit your throat and not bat an eye. His name was Joseph Dragon Sambo. He pulled his hand up to his neck and made the slit my throat gesture. You know the one. We left the room and the detective gave me a copy of his report sheet. Amongst others, 4 counts of murder, I think 8 or 9 for attempted murder, multiple assaults, aggravated assault, over hundreds of house break-ins and robberies and rape. I was shocked. The detective told me that had I not taken him out first and fast that night, I would have definitely not gotten away so lightly. Now, this is also not where the story ends. 3 days later, I get another call from the detective saying that I should be careful, as he had escaped from the custody and they hadn't caught him yet. I wasn't too worried, as the robbery wasn't at my house and I'd changed cars, so he probably couldn't find me. I'd also gotten my firearms license and carried my pistol on me 24/7. I didn't hear anything after that until about 2 years later when I saw the detective in the grocery shop. We started talking about the case and she told me that he was killed during a home invasion. He broke into the wrong house and the owner was waiting for him, pistol in hand. Shot him once in the stomach and once in the neck. And thanks to the slow response time of emergency services and police, he bled out on the guy's living room floor, ridding society of a piece of human garbage. I want to add a bit of info to this. All 3 that were caught were Mozambican nationals, undocumented, no fingerprints or ID in the system. Essentially illegal immigrants. And it is of opinion in South Africa that more than 70% of all violent crimes is done by illegal immigrants. Mainly Mozambican, Zimbabwean, and Nigerian descent. It makes it fairly easy because none of those countries have extradition to South Africa, so if it gets too hot, they just flee back over the border and nothing can be done to them. This whole ordeal has made me more vigilant. It's heightened my situational awareness and made me a little paranoid to double and triple check all doors, locks, windows, etc. My heightened situational awareness has also allowed me to remove myself from a few potentially dangerous situations in the years after the incident. But it also robbed me of my peace of mind. I've since immigrated to a safer country, but I still sometimes wake up at night if I hear a noise. So, to keep up with tradition, Joseph, we will never meet again as you've passed, but to his cronies or anyone that wants to try something similar, please do pay me a visit. I will arrange your swift departure and reunion with Joseph in hell. And to Joseph, I hope he died in agony for poisoning Daisy.